Item number 2, consider approving the April 7th, 2022 business session minutes.
Okay. They will stay on consent. Item number 3 on the action agenda.
Resolution number 022-22, application number SW22-187-FDP-GA. Consider a request from Van Trust Real Estate Development, LLC, applicant, and Johnson County landowner for a final development plan for Building A and B1 for the new Century Commerce Center East Area Plan on 71.5 acres, zoned PEC-LP, Logistics Park District, located at the southwest corner of 159th Street and Clear Road.
Mr. Penley.
Good morning, Commissioner Sean Penley, County Planning Staff. As indicated, this is a final development plan for New Century Commerce Center. The subject property is located at the southwest corner of 159th Street and Clare Road. As indicated on the vicinity map, the subject property is outlined in red. This is a part of the overall New Century Commerce Center East Area Plan. As you are aware, the board approved a rezoning and preliminary development plan in November of 2021. Phase 1 infrastructure was also approved on February 24th of this year, and this represents the first final development plan for the first 2 buildings in the Commerce Center. As this preliminary or a final site development plan here is outlined in red, the remaining areas are part of the approved preliminary development plan. So the first 2 buildings here at the corner of 159th and Clare Road, this represents a total area of 71.5 acres. And Building A has a total area of 330,000 square feet, and Building B1 to the south, fronting Clare Road, has a total area of that Building B1 is 752,000 square feet. This, as part of the development, as I indicated, there was a final development plan for infrastructure. So the first phase of that will be Green Road that will be constructed that's intersecting 159th Street, and that will serve as access for the 2 buildings. Traffic impact study was submitted for the proposed development, and the Public Works Department has reviewed and accepted that traffic study. There has been ongoing coordination with the City of Olathe, City of Gardner, and KDOT for review and comments of the development. This just shows a little bit more detail for the site development plan. There was also a landscape plans that were submitted as part of this development in compliance with county zoning regulations. Building elevations are included. The proposed building design and materials will comply with the county's architectural and design requirements for industrial buildings. And the applicants submitted concept renderings showing the overall development. As indicated here, buildings A and B1 are located in the corner. This is looking south, so it's a bird's eye view looking south at the overall development. And another rendering showing a concept for the building design. Staff recommends approval of the final development plan. The zoning board, Southwest Consolidated Zoning Board, held a public hearing on March 23rd of 2022. Nobody from the public spoke at that hearing, and the zoning board recommended approval with a vote of 7-0, including the stipulations as recommended. Be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, as I understand at this time, these are spec buildings that will be built.
Correct? That is correct. Spec buildings, and the Van Trust Real Estate team, the design team is underway with working on building design plans, and that is correct. There's no tenants identified at this time, but they're actively marketing those forward.
And again, would note that this is a final development plan. All the zoning has occurred. Ms. O'Hara.
Thank you. Our agreement with Van Trust is a 65% property tax abatement for 10 years on these buildings. Is that correct?
I would probably want to
I think
check with Arenado.
75%.
Oh, 75%? Okay.
Yes.
We can
So it's a
coordinate with Arenado and the Van Trust team to.
Okay, so it's 75%. So they're going to be paying just 25% of their property taxes. And then also there's a cap on that. What's the annual cap?
I was thinking it was the maximum, up to 75%.
Well, it's 75%, but then there's an annual cap on the increase. As I remember, I'd like to know what that is. Again, I'm just emphasizing that we are subsidizing these developments, and I understand that this is water under the bridge and that this is already going forward, but the public needs to understand that these huge buildings, every time they look at one of these huge buildings, they have to understand that a good property tax is 50%. That is about all that anyone's going to expect these huge buildings to be paying. And a lot of them, these are only going to be paying 25%, plus they have a lid, as I understand it, on the annual increase. And then the ones down in Edgerton, they're paying 16 cents a square foot, and that's frozen for 10 years. People just need to understand how this impacts their property taxes. So that's my comment.
Economic development is an important activity in our county, has been for decades, and hopefully economic development activities will continue. This is a planning item, so it will remain on action. Mr. Ashcraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Quinlan, just a sidebar interest. Is there a solar component with this facility, given topics of recent discussion?
Sean Penley, planning staff. We are not aware of any proposal at this time for utility scale solar or accessory use of solar, but certainly that could happen. As an individual applicant, there have been some industrial buildings in the county that have used a solar component as part of the building. That can be allowed if it's just as part of an individual building. That is allowed as an accessory use. But if it's utility scale solar, of course, it would be a whole different deal.
I understand. Thank you.
All right. Well, this will remain on action. Thank you. Next item.
Item number 4, request for a proposal, RFP number 2021-028. Consider authorizing a contract with Via Mobility for transportation management software at a cost not to exceed $381,200 for a period of 3 years with the option to renew for 2 additional 12-month periods, and authorize the reclassification of FY 2022 mental health reserves in the amount of $128,000.
Mr. Fortney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tanner Fortney, Mental Health. So the request before you today is to purchase some new transportation management software for our transportation team. I think as most of you know, we have a transportation service that we provide. It's a peer support service to our drivers, which is very beneficial in terms of helping our staff or our clients to be competitively employed within the community. We've managed transportation software for about 19 years is when we received the current software we use, but that software is very outdated. It's not supported. It's a very small organization that supports it. It's also gotten to the point where, because of the environment that we live in today, it's started to become a cybersecurity risk, and probably most importantly from our perspective is it's just not functional at meeting our needs anymore. There are a lot of very manual, intense processes that we have to do, and we have a lot of staff time that goes into that, and with being short-staffed in general these days, it's really putting a strain on our ability to be organized and manage our services. So with that being said, in April of 2021, so about a year ago, we began working with the Department of Technology and Innovation as well as the county's purchasing department to complete an RFP, which went out last fall, which spec'd out what our needs were for a new software. That process was completed at the beginning of 2022, and we sent that out to over 740 vendors. 24 had reviewed the proposal, and we had 3 that had actually responded, 2 of which we conducted interviews for. And as you can see from the briefing sheet, the successful vendor, Via Mobility, was head and shoulders above the second vendor that had applied that we had interviewed. So with that, we feel very, very good about this software. It's a very robust software. It will meet our needs. It will help us to automate things much easier for our drivers, and ultimately, because of the manual processes that we'll be getting rid of, we probably won't be able to eliminate staffing positions, but this will definitely allow us to not have to add any in the coming years. It'll be much more efficient with what we do. As far as the funding of the software, so the first year that we have the software, this is a 3-year contract with 2 one-year renewals. For the first 3 years of the contract, the first year will be funded by most of the monies that we receive from United Healthcare as part of our joint venture on transportation. In the second and third years of that project, the funds will come from a combination of UHC monies as well as some grant monies that mental health currently receives, and some of our transportation operating funds, which we have. We certainly won't need all of those, but I lay out a bunch of different scenarios there just in case we did need additional funds. The total cost is $381,200 over the first 3 years of the contract, which which is roughly $128,000 annually. We are going to be requesting, because this was not included in the 2022 budget, we are asking for a reclassification of reserves so that we'll be able to have the spending authority to do it. But again, the funds are already there. We're just using United Healthcare funds, but we need the reserve authority to make the purchase. So with that, I'll be happy to answer questions.
Questions? Mr. Ashcraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This item is in good order, and I'm happy to support it going to consent, although I'm not sure the value of the metric of the number of firms notified. I know we have to provide that for some reason. But, Mr. Tanner, could you elaborate a little bit? Transportation operating revenues, what is that exactly? Is that the fees that people pay, or partial fees that they can afford to pay to, or what is that?
Yeah, what that is that, so our transportation is heavily subsidized both by our county tax dollars that we do use, but it is also paid for by outside funding as well, and we do receive some grant funds for certain vehicles. But we do charge our clients a cost right now. As of the beginning of this year, it's $4 per trip within Johnson County, and for the few that do work on the Missouri side of the line, that's $8 a trip.
So that's what those, okay.
Correct,
Thank you.
yes.
Thank you.
And those are your clients, not general public.
Correct. They're mental health clients, and they are JCDS clients.
Right. Okay. Other questions? Ms. O'Hara?
You shared with me the number of people that we service or have as clients. Could you address that? How many people that we have as clients?
The total number of clients for mental health in 2021 was, I believe, approximately 8,600. Now that is, I want to be clear that is actual clients that are open and active to services. That does not count the approximately 43,000 crisis calls and contacts that we receive for individuals that are in crisis that are calling into our emergency services.
Okay. All right.
I remember at one point, was it 40% of the county of mental health concerns were not serving? It was really a large.
It's a pretty large number. I'd say it's probably about 50% of the eligible population for our services are not being served by us, correct?
Okay.
Okay. Consent has been recommended. Any objection? All right, so noted. Thank you, Tanner.
Thank you.
Next two items need to be read, and Mr. Pedig, I think you have the honors of speaking to these two items, so the clerk will.
I do, yes. These two items go together, so we'll be talking about them kind of at the same time.
Okay, the clerk will please read.
Item number 5, consider approving the Johnson County Annual Noxious Weed Eradication Progress Report for 2021. And item number 6, consider approving the Johnson County Annual Noxious Weed Management Plan for 2022.
This is an annual activity.
Correct.
I don't know that there's been significant changes from year to year. Could you give us the executive summary?
I sure can. And unfortunately, Jim Hoke can't be here. I don't have his experience and wisdom on these types of issues, but if you have questions, I'll get with Jim and we'll respond. There actually has been a couple significant changes to the noxious weed law, which I want to start with that, which is they have developed an advisory committee that can now look at the noxious weeds that are in the state and very quickly respond as to how to manage those. And they have also developed, the second item, they developed 3 categories of level of concern with these noxious weeds. Fortunately, in Johnson County, all 4 of our noxious weeds are in category C, which is the lowest level, and that's essentially control. Jim likes to say, when he talks to folks, keep them on your side of the fence. So we had the progress report, which did show about a 9% increase in infestation, and there were some optimal growing conditions and reporting that increased that. Jim, nevertheless, is very comfortable with where we're at in our control of noxious weeds. So that's the first item on the control, or the report of 2021. 2022, Jim has outlined in his report to the state how we will go forward. And you'll note that Jim does an excellent job with social media outreach. He attends fairs, events, and he works very hard on educating and training folks on how to control their noxious weeds. So I'll stop there. That's
Okay.
the summary.
Well, I'm going to recommend that we put this one on consent, these two items. Are there questions, Ms. O'Hara?
Yeah, so major component is thistles.
Must Thistle is one of ours, yes.
And what about Bradford pears? Bradford pears have become an extremely invasive species, and they're just lining the ditches out on 175th Street, whether you're in the county or in the city of Overland Park. Has that been? I mean, I know it's not a weed, but are we addressing that? I mean, they're worse than cedar trees. It's just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, agreed. I've never been a fan of Bradford pear. I'll talk with Jim about that and see if there's any thought that
Okay.
that advisory committee is looking at it. Is it a weed? Could it be? Those types.
I understand it's not a weed, but it is clogging up our ditches.
Well, anything that you don't want's really a weed.
Ms.
That's
Hensley,
true.
you have a question?
Thank you. No, I appreciate Commissioner O'Hara bringing that up, because that was exactly a question I was going to ask, because I know the city of Overland Park is looking at, or has program in place addressing Bradford pears. But I just wanted to ask, does this also address, I think it's called green algae, or the algae that gets in the ponds, or the different bodies of water? I know a couple of years ago it was a big problem, and I believe like if dogs ate it, they would get sick. Didn't know if that was if that comes under our noxious weed program.
To my knowledge, it does not, but I've written that down. I'll talk with Jim and get his thoughts.
Thank you.
All right. Any objection to consent, Mr. Icecraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I have no objections to consent, although I would be interested in learning more, Mr. Pedic, before next week, if we could visit on the efforts you've made. And I was going to add on to what Commissioner Hanslick and Commissioner O'Hara had said. There was a news report this past week, I believe, that talked about, and I thought it was the state of Kansas at that level, attacking these Bradford pears because they've become a haven, and I'll call it bagworms or webworms, and it's spilling over into other vegetation. So, yeah, it's a weed. I agree with you. It's just a very tall weed.
Okay. All right. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. O'Hara.
I just want to let the commissioners know how bad of a problem this is. If you have a pasture and you don't keep it mowed, I mean, it will be absolutely taken over in 2 years with these Bradford pears. It's really phenomenal as to how the spread has
All right.
occurred.
Ms. Mast.
So in a lot of the rural counties, where my family farm is and stuff, the county really encourages the burning, and then the reseeding. Do we have any, does that happen in our rural areas? And that's how you really get, rid of that hazardous weeds.
I know there is some, but again, I'll check with Jim and see if he has a scope as to how much burning we do.
Okay. All right. Well,
Mr. Chairman,
can we continue? Oh, go ahead.
we do burn in Heritage Park. They do have burn areas there. I don't know about the other parks.
Very limited. All right. Okay. Well, this will remain on consent. Move it to consent. Next item.
Item number 7, consider withdrawing from the interlocal agreement with the Kansas City Area Transportation Authority, KCATA, for the management of transit services in Johnson County effective August 1st, 2022, to establish the Johnson County Transit Division within the Public Works Department and to authorize 5 new FTE positions to support the mission of Johnson County Transit in the ongoing provision of transit service in Johnson County and the long-term partnership with the KCATA.
Mr. Newfield.
Thank you. Scott Newfield with the manager's office. What's before you is quite a bit to unpack. I will offer a little background, try to go quick. We discussed this with Penny months ago, and she asked me to thoroughly vet this notion, this idea of what we're proposing. And so I put together a work team with Leslie from Budget, Grace Hanna from Innovation, and Colin Duffy from the manager's office. And as we talked about in the briefing sheet, we studied various options, and we landed on planning primarily for a couple of key reasons. One is currently we landed on Public Works. Currently in planning, there's some capacity with Jay, quite frankly, being stretched fairly thin, and that was a concern for me as somebody who works with him closely. And with housing and with these changes, this is going to ramp up. We have the pilot program starting this year, and that's really increasing our capacity by about a third. And so we really looked at this as an opportunity to reevaluate. One of the key things with transit is that our service providers are WHC and First Transit, and they're the drivers, the dispatchers, the mechanics, all those folks. And so that's about 125 drivers and about 45 FTEs. So this is 5 FTEs that reside in the county hierarchy, or will in Public Works Department, but then will help Josh manage those contracts and oversee the provision of services. So to the ridership, this will be invisible. We are staying part of Ride KC. We were very happy with that partnership with KCATA because, quite frankly, there's one bus system, there's one set of schedules, one set of routes. It's a lot simpler for the ridership, for the residents. And so we're very happy to continue that partnership. That's been very successful, and we're very pleased. But with all the changes with the pilot programs, we thought that we wanted more direct control of our destiny, so to speak. And so it's an opportune time. There's a number of vacancies at KCATA right now, so this is a pretty easy time for us to ramp up and them to back off. We've had numerous discussions with them, and they've asked Josh to come and share that with the ATA board next week, and so he's going to represent us and share with them what we're doing there. So for us, it's a big deal. For them, it's not quite as big a deal because we're the biggest part of the overall system other than Kansas City, Missouri, but it is quite a bit more substantial than us. So we think this is kind of a win-win, to be honest with you, and they've been very supportive. Penny and I met with Jameson Otten, who's the deputy CEO. He's the chief operating officer and the deputy CEO. And I think his words were, "We will do whatever we can to support you in this." So it was a really good meeting, really positive. And so we're very excited about this. I also want to thank Jay and Brian because they were very supportive and very open as we take this on. Brian has a former finance manager from KCATA on his staff now, Mick Letcher, and he has helped us out numerous times with the finances and is continuing now. We have a person at KCATA that's on leave that does the finances, so he's been stepping up. So he's been a great help. And then obviously Josh has done a lot. You all were very supportive of the pilot programs that we presented earlier this year, and Josh has put a lot of work in this. So I appreciate Penny's faith in us to make this change. Penny and I were involved in putting this together 5 or 6 years ago, and we're pretty excited about it. And we're anxious. You know, we need to get some folks on board, but hopefully you all had a chance to talk to most of you, except for Commissioner Ashcraft. So I appreciate those meetings and those conversations. You know, and I meant to this week, and when I came up for air, you weren't, you know, so I apologize for that. I tried to. So anyway, I'm happy to stand for any questions, but basically, we will be coming back in the coming months. I think we have to do a budget amendment, and I think there's a resolution tied to the charter because this is of a magnitude that requires a charter division. And lastly, I would say is that when I first came to the county I eventually ended up in budget in the late 90s, and I was the budget analyst for Public Works, and that's where transit was back then. So transit has been several different places over the years. They will remain a fund in the budget book. Obviously, they're a high priority, so we'll be putting those FTEs in the transit fund, but organizationally, they'll be parked in Public Works. So anyway, there's a lot there, but I was just trying to get as much as I could on the record, so thank you.
Yeah. I think this step back is important and I think very positive, especially within light of some of the pilot projects that we will have going and the need to pay close attention to hopefully make those as successful as they can be.
We're very
Comments,
excited about
Mr.
this.
Myers?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Being the liaison for the KCATA board, leadership of KCATA has sent out a communication to all the commissioners on that board that they are very supportive of this change.
Okay, Ms. Hanslick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the former liaison to the KCATA board, I really appreciate the work that staff has done on this proposed action. I'm excited about it because I think it allows us to continue to take advantage of our relationship with KCATA and be part of RIDE KC, while also kind of pulling some of those managerial oversight closer to us so that we can more rapidly and tailor our management of our transit system to our needs in Johnson County, and especially with the pilot program. We really want that to be a great success. And so I'm very excited about this new opportunity. And again, thank you all for all of your hard work. I know this was a lot of work.
And Penny
to
put us through the
county
paces.
manager, too.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ashcraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Conceptually, I think it's appropriate to look at this arrangement from time to time because, Mr. Chairman, like you, back in 2014, we were driven by a harsh economic reality about sustaining the program the way it used to be and saw the KCATA as an avenue. And I know a lot has changed since then. I will say I've looked at the briefing sheet. I am struggling with the cost-benefit analysis, so I'm sure you will be prepared when we visit to get me in the right place.
Okay, Ms. O'Hara?
I fully support this. I'm thrilled. The further we can get away from KCATA, the better as far as I'm concerned. Their attitude that they can come over to Johnson County and use eminent domain to transfer private property to private developers and then put up high-density apartment complexes that could be tax exempt for up to 30 years is just beyond the pale as far as I'm concerned. So I'm thrilled with this.
Thank you. And
This change does not impact any of those other issues.
yeah,
Oh, I know. I understand that. That's a fight to be continued.
Okay, all right, thank you. Any other questions? This will remain on action. Thank you very much. Next item.
Item number 8, IFB number 2022-031. Consider authorizing a contract with BCI Mechanical Incorporated to replace 2 boilers and associated piping at the Juvenile Detention Center, JUVDET, located at 915 West Spruce, Olathe, Kansas 66061, in the amount not to exceed $149,802.
All right, Mr. Waters, we got 5 minutes left before the executive session.
I don't need all that 5 minutes, Mr. Chairman. Joe Waters, Assistant County Manager, Interim Facilities Director. Commissioners, this is a request to replace 2 boilers in the Juvenile Detention Center. These boilers are about 27 years old, original to that phase of the construction. We have lined up this planned work for the spring and summer season, of course, since these boilers are needed to heat the facility. Expected life on equipment like this is in that 25-year range. The maintenance has been increasing. The parts are getting harder to come by. The project was budgeted in FY21, and design work was then done and put out for bids for this timing, with the specific timing of the award in mind. Good solid bids, 7 respondents, a number of very good contractors, pretty broad range, which is not unusual in this market. The lowest bidder, BCI Mechanical, is a good, solid contractor that the engineer has reviewed, our consulting engineer has reviewed their bid to make sure that it is all-inclusive and they are satisfied and well-prepared to proceed. Just as a point of to make that the engineer's estimate was about $230,000. This is in that at $150,000, well within that. But the engineer's estimate was pretty much what the average was for among the 7 respondents. With that, I would stand for any questions.
Okay. The overall question, this is needed?
Yes, sir, it is.
Thank you.
Consent?
Consent will be fine. Mr. Ashcraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no objections to consent, but just to clarify, BCI, they're in good standing. We checked the references, and you're satisfied with this firm. You said the consulting engineer had done that. Is that correct?
Yes, the consulting engineer has done that and talked with them about their bid.
Very good. Thank you.
So it is 13% under the next, so.
Other questions? All right, if not, this will go to consent.
Thank you.
Are there any other items to consider at this time?
No, sir.
All right, that concludes our agenda review. We are adjourned. We continue in recess from our open session. Excuse me, in about 3 minutes, we'll begin our executive session. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.